All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello to all. Scrape off that last bit of Burning Man, everybody. Come on, burners. You know. It was great. It wasn't as bad as the media says. Okay, whatever you say. I think if you have to crap in the middle of the desert without any toilet facility, I think it's pretty bad. I don't know. But all right, you have it your way. Great to have everybody in the mix. I'm talking about Kim.
Kim, how are you?
Yes, Kim is coming off the Nikki Maduro show, sliding over. Like the old-time Mercury Theater with Orson Welles. He used to go from one show to the next. Orson Welles, they used to take him in an ambulance from one studio on one side of Manhattan to the studio on the other side of Manhattan to avoid traffic. He would travel in an ambulance. That's where Kim is with our show. Coming off Nikki to our show, and then she slides into the after party. And Tony is here, everybody.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah. Tony, who is like a Batman. When we have a problem, we put the bat beam up, and Tony shows up every time, baby.
And goes, ah.
No, you're pretty strong, pal. You always show up. I appreciate
Thanks,
that. Yeah. So, welcome. I hope everybody had a great 3-day weekend. I see already. Now, the house rule is when somebody throws us a super sticker or super chat, we'll try to acknowledge it right away or as close to right away as makes sense given the course of the conversation, the texture of the show, whatever it might be. But so I saw one come in that is particularly, I think, relevant. It's from Sandy. Let me put my credibility glasses on for a moment. First of all, big shout out.
Big shout out.
Sandy threw $10 into the show. You know, we're crowdfunded, so we have to sit here and scrounge for money, which is not the part of the show that I like, but it's a reality, so we try to make it fun or whatever. We certainly try to acknowledge people who help us. Sandy says, if I send money, will you start the show on time?
Oh, Sandy's tired of waiting for you.
No, well,
Big shout out.
Okay. I know it's hard. It's hard to start I'll tell you what. For you, Sandy, I'm going to dedicate the start of the show tomorrow to Sandy, and it will be started on time. The only thing that would stand in the way of that is technical failure of some kind. But otherwise, I promise you we'll start on time. So that is my promise I make to you, Sandy, based on pointing it out.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I just want to mention David Cay Johnston, the Pulitzer Prize winner, joins us in the second hour. There's so much to talk about. I'll tell you, I typically lob an email into David and I'll say, hey, maybe you're interested in speaking about this or this. And then he'll say, well, I'd like to do more of this than that. So we try to have some kind of coherence to our conversations when we present them to you, even though it's obviously just an extemporaneous conversation that bounces around here to there, and your input and your questions come in and they direct the conversation as well. Anyway, there's so much stuff that I've sent David Cay Johnston that I literally have no idea what he'll want to speak of. But there is a move in the state of Wisconsin to essentially, it's a supermajority of Republicans there, even though it's a Democratic state, more or less. But they've gerrymandered so intensely. They're now talking about removing the new justice there, this more liberal justice. They're talking about removing her before her term even starts. Same is true in North Carolina. So these are power grabs on the part of the GOP to affect the courts and the gerrymandered districts, because obviously the gerrymandered districts are being challenged, I should say, in court. And so if you can rig the courts, then you can uphold these gerrymandered districts. So anyway, that's like one thing that's going on. As mentioned, North Carolina, Wisconsin. And it's more to the point, even if you take those specifics aside, a strategy being employed by the GOP. in states across the country. And I suggest even in America, you have a majority of Americans who more line up with liberal ideals, or at least middle-of-the-road liberal ideals. They're not represented by the government. Why not? Because of the way we've set up the Electoral College and the way we've established the Senate, in my view, which is ludicrous. So even as we talk about, well, it's about the vote and it's about the people's voice. The people's voice is A, not honored by our system, B,
ridiculous,
suppressed by our system, and lastly, I'd say the people's voice is just ignored by the system. There's no way within this existing system for the people's voice to really be represented. So anyway, that's part of a bigger issue. That'll be in my book, everybody. All right, yeah, I'll save a lot of that for the book. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
We might touch on Ukraine as well, but I wanted to get to Burning Man. What was that, Kim? Did you have something?
Well, there was a breaking story earlier this morning, and I mentioned it on Nikki's show about a half an hour ago, but now it's over, so I kind of want to mention it again. There was a nationwide ground stop put into place by United Airlines today. They had some equipment trouble, so they put a ground stop into place, and they lifted it right as the show was beginning, the Mark Thompson Show. They knew that, we were starting and it was time.
Yeah.
But I do want to let you know that may mean delays for people on United. If you're picking somebody up or flying out, call ahead, check in, because the ground stop is over, but those flights that were delayed now may be a little backed up. So.
Well, that's a big, so how long did that go on? Hours this morning?
No. It started at about 10:30. Mm-hmm. And it was over by 11. So it was a half an hour ground stop, but it did mean the planes that were in the air were able to continue flying to their destination, but the planes that were due to leave, they all had to wait.
Boy,
and
can
so
you imagine being in the air and hearing that there's a ground stop? It just has to be,
some kind of equipment failure. So
yeah. So look, I mentioned politics, and we are we're a news-centric, I would say, political centric show, meaning we talk about a lot of politics here, and we try to bring you conversations, but we also talk about other stuff, obviously. By the way, I got an interesting series of emails over the weekend that I'll share with you a little bit later in the show. But anyway, that informs a lot, and I did touch on politics when we started the show, but now I'd like to just talk about a cultural phenomenon, and that is Burning Man. Burning Man is this sojourn to the desert, and a lot of people go. And when the weather turns nasty, it can be beyond just the winds and the heat. It can be a big, muddy mess.
Have you ever been?
No, it's just not my scene at all.
It's not your deal?
No. In fact...
It doesn't look fun to you?
Well, even without... I understand you can look at these images and go, that's not fun. But even with the best weather and the best conditions, it's just not my scene. It's not me, Sojourn is a ding word, says Trevor. Okay. Trevor sent me new drops for you, by the way. I'll do that a little bit later.
Thanks,
but right
Trevor.
Now, Tony, share with us a little bit of Burning Man and what happened. So here we go.
That sunshine you see is the savior drying the mud just enough for tires to grip, not sink into sludge.
It was impossible to function, impossible to move around. A lot of struggling people in what became very cold, very storm-like conditions. People's tents and entire camps became pretty much destroyed.
More than 70,000 people were basically trapped for days.
Burning Man, Water Man.
Trapped in this makeshift desert city that pops up in Nevada every year around Labor Day, filled with campers and creators, fun lovers, and those with their freak flags flying, that culminates in the man burning.
We planned on leaving right after the burn, which is Saturday night. And then it started raining on us. Everybody took their shoes off, started dancing in the mud. It was great. And then the reality sunk in that we couldn't leave.
Chris Rock and some other celebs decided to take the only uncomfortable exit available.
He had his New York Knicks jacket on, and he just got up with us and started walking. And we walked about 3 hours in the mud, and he was happy it was me I think Cindy Crawford walked with us, Kaya Gerber, Austin Butler. It was a challenge, but it was honestly one of the highlights of the whole trip.
Thousands of others stuck it out, many embracing the ethos of self-reliance that surrounds this festival.
I was waiting for the looting, honestly. I thought that would have been great. But nah, like, it's really beautiful, actually, when you go into the camps. Everybody was helping each other out.
Burning Man, Raining Man, suck it up, stick it out.
I have my RV here, and all my other campmates have either RVs or big rental trucks or things like that. And getting those out was basically impossible. I mean, sure, you could have walked out, but what am I going to do with all my stuff?
All this chaos caused by less than an inch of rain.
Even just the slightest bit of rain makes everything super slick. When you walk around on your feet, you have like 5 pounds of mud on your feet.
Why? Well, this is a desert. Nothing much grows, so the soil isn't lovely, loamy, and absorbent. It's just miles of grey clay. Most years, this is a dusty, not a muddy mess. And under an inch of rain, well, that's still 2 or 3 months' worth of rain in this arid land within just 24 hours. Noon on Monday, organisers said about 64,000 people remained on the site. That was just a couple of hours before.
Wow. So that's just noon on Monday. That was yesterday, more or less at this time.
Yeah.
And people were stranded there, right? There just was no way to comfortably get out. I mean, I get it. If you're a star and you're super rich, you can ride out on the back of somebody who wants to carry you out type thing.
Yeah.
But otherwise, man.
There was this mass exodus yesterday afternoon when the roads reopened, and people are still leaving now.
My friends who all go on that high-end kind of, oh, yes, our RV is choppered in, and we have, of course, we have a private chef, and we have air conditioning and showers every day, Mark. It's not the roughing it that you think. Well, I know that when you step outside that little camp that you set up, it's this Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome thing that you do. And it just ain't my deal, man. I mean, I really, there's no, I shouldn't say no, but to make the point, it seems utterly unappetizing to me to go. You wouldn't want to go, would you?
No, it's not my thing either. Although I've heard that there's a sense of community and a sense of all being in this thing together and a sharing. It's kind of transcends your normal like festival, and it's a more of an event. And so I understand the allure of it and wanting to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't do dirty.
Right.
It just the whole thing seems dusty and musty and dirty to me.
Oh,
so
it definitely is this, and they revel in the mud and the dirt. And that kind
I sound like such an old person right now.
No, I mean I think you just have it's different strokes type thing.
Yeah.
Allure is a ding word, by the way. Yeah. In any case, we hope everybody's made it out who needed to get out. I'm sure it's going to be a process as it continues.
There's a place in Petaluma where a Burning Man artist has a yard kind of on right off one of the main streets, and they store these massive metal sculptures. And so they're kind of a fixture in Petaluma. They're transported to Burning Man every year, and they're huge. There's a weird face and a serpent with something coming out of its mouth, and like they tower over the gates of this yard where they're created. And so there's kind of a touch of Burning Man here in Petaluma.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah.
Well, I think the part of Burning Man that appeals to me, and that doesn't make me want to go, but it does appeal to me, is the art. The big art installations.
Right.
That stuff I think is really cool. There's something called Desert X, where huge art installations are set up in the desert. And so the landscape around the installations actually becomes part of the art display. It's spectacular. I encourage people to check it out. It's near Palm Springs. It's called Desert X. They do it every year.
Google it.
I think you should Google it. Find it, and you should go and see. It's something. Plan a weekend. That's what we do. It's really something extraordinary. But, and I get it, if you're in the art, the music, the drugs, honestly, a lot of people are on, mushrooms or whatever, or ecstasy. That becomes part of it too. That's just not my jam. So for me, it's, it's the art and I suppose the music, but I don't need the dirt factor, I'm with you. Like, I don't need to pull sand out of my butt to enjoy music. You know what I mean?
Speaking of your butt, I was reading a Chronicle article last year. There's a sex tent at Burning Man, like a free lovin'. You walk in and like whoever's doing it, you're just join in. That's what I read.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. Let's take a meeting on that. I don't know. Yeah, that's a little bit much. Man.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how popular that tent is.
Party of four.
Yes, thank you. There'll be 4 of us. I don't know if that disrupts the overall numbers, but that's the way we roll. Man, well, it sounds like you know a lot about Burning Man, but neither one of us is gonna.
I read about it. Yeah, that's about the extent of it.
All right.
Make us beg.
What? I love it. All right, continuing on. Here we go.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah. So, I saw that the Great Wall of China was damaged by, these. This is not your typical like graffiti type damage. An excavator, they were digging with an excavator through the Great Wall of China, a 55-year-old woman and a 38-year-old man. They were trying to create a shortcut for their construction work nearby. And supposedly, they expanded an existing opening in the ancient structure of the Great Wall into this wide gap that's large enough for their excavator to pass through. This is so that they wouldn't have to travel as far to get to and from their work site.
So you're going to destroy a World Heritage site because you're too lazy to go around?
Exactly.
Stop it.
Their excavation caused, quote, irreversible damage to the integrity and safety of that portion of the wall. Police in Yu County detained the 2 suspects after getting reports about the damage. This just in, the Chinese are not exactly the mellowest about stuff like that. I don't know how it's all going to go down, but I
think you might be going to Chinese prison, friends.
Anybody know how big the total length of the Great Wall is? Anybody? It's kind of an obscure, I would take a rounded number. How long is the Great Wall of China? How many miles? Kim is right. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. How many miles? 2,460, says RJ. No, it's more than that. 1,200 miles, says Karen. No, more than that. 2,700 miles. No, more than that. More than 2,000, John Slade. In fact, you're cold. Trevor says 11,780. I'm just looking for 11,780 miles. Snell says 13,000. Commentator also says 11,780. Who said 13,000? 13,000 plus, says Snell. It's a 12,427 miles, everyone. That is pretty impressive. That's a big wall. The earliest sections of the Great Wall of China date more than 2,000, back to 2,000 years ago, more than that. And then through the various dynasties, they extended it. The part of the wall that was damaged dates back to the Ming Dynasty, mid-1300s, all the way till the mid-1600s.
I mean, you'd think people that live there would know that. I mean, like we know the historical significance of the Golden Gate Bridge, or pick a landmark. If you live near the Great Wall of China, you would think you would be well versed in its history, and that you would respect it and love it and value it, not damage it because you're too lazy to go around. Outrageous.
People in this country, they'll scrape their initials into places in Yosemite, places around, we've seen it, right? Yeah. If you go to Utah and, you go to these natural wonders in this country, you'll see it. You'll see graffiti and vandalism. It happens. I mean, from Americans, you know. So the fact that these Chinese people did this, it's also sort of familiarity breeds contempt. It's like, yeah, whatever. I mean, this is just a little part of the wall that we're going to... Anyway, they've cracked down a lot, the Chinese have, on just what Kim's talking about, acts of vandalism. And these two, who are Chinese, they will have some explaining to do. That's for sure. So there's that.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Over the weekend, something happened that was sad, everyone. I don't know how many people here in our chat, in our audience, listening and watching, were Jimmy Buffett fans, but he did something that was pretty amazing. More than a recording artist, Jimmy Buffett was a lifestyle brand, wasn't he? I mean, he became this piece of Americana, of beach yacht rock Americana. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
He was beloved. I mean, apparently he had a rare skin cancer that he'd been fighting for 4 years. He passed away at 76. There's his website. Is that what that is, Tony? Off of, or Kim, is that what that is?
That's what they posted on like Twitter and stuff, just letting everyone know. The little like final picture stuff people always do.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tony.
Jimmy passed away peacefully, it says. He was undergoing treatment for this Merkel cell skin cancer, but still performing for the last 4 years. His last show was a surprise appearance in Rhode Island in early July. They called those people who would go to his shows and all dressed up and wearing the stuff parrot heads, right? Wasn't that what they were called? And in a sense, the skin cancer, which is, of course, propelled by sun exposure, is, not surprisingly, a part of Jimmy Buffett's life, since he was really, he's always out in the sun, on the beach, on a boat, right? But more to the point, his magic covered decades. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing what Jimmy Buffett has done. I was trying to think of other artists. The Dead come to mind. You know how the Dead had a lifestyle brand, and they still do.
Not like Jimmy Buffett, though. Maybe, but Jimmy Buffett. I was looking up the other night. He had hotels and resorts and restaurants, and I mean, this was a whole, like, he had he was a businessman. And I was watching this interview with him, and he was talking about how he had to learn fast how to take what he was doing and turn it into this money-making opportunity. I was watching this interview with him on the David Letterman show, where he sang Come Monday. And he was talking about being in a hotel in Mill Valley, somewhere in Marin County, feeling so sad. And he was a performer in the Bay Area, in Marin and in San Francisco. And that's where he began all of this.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. That's really cool. A lot of roads lead back to the Bay Area.
Yeah.
But he dubbed his brand of music, quote, drunken Caribbean rock and roll.
That's right.
And he's arguably best known for Margaritaville, they say here, which was released in 1977. I love that song, Come Monday.
Yeah.
I just love that. I think that, it just hits on all pistons, But the brand, the Margaritaville brand, which is restaurants, resorts, a radio station, clothing, and apparel, as Kim says, and there's food and drink items like beer and tequila and salad dressings and salsa, it made him a billionaire.
That's right.
Forbes this month placed his real-time net worth at $1 billion. In an apparent nod to his business pursuits in the song A Pirate Looks 40, Buffett sang that he, quote, made enough money to buy Miami, but I pissed it away so fast. Never meant to last, never meant to last. Buffett nominated for 2 Grammy Awards for Hey Good Lookin', a cover of the Hank Williams classic, and It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere, a duet with country superstar Alan Jackson that he did. Elton John was among the stars to pay tribute, calling him a, quote, unique and treasured entertainer. His fans adored him, and he never let them down. This is the saddest of news. A lovely man gone way too soon, said Elton John. Actor Miles Teller posted photos of himself with Jimmy Buffett, and all kinds of tributes from his Parrot Head community. I really, again, I wasn't part of that and didn't seek that stuff out. Love those songs that we've talked about, and I think he did a great job. And I love the happiness and joy that he clearly brought so many people. It wasn't, again, my thing, but I do have friends who would go to those, Parrot Head scenes in Las Vegas and elsewhere, and they said they were just magnificent. So, I mean, what a party. And, as this crowd gets older, it's a real civilized party because there's less, I want to jump, but I can't jump. So, but he actually, I think, pretty much covered a lot of different demographics. So anyway, rest in peace, dear fellow, apparently, from all accounts, Jimmy Buffett passes away at 76. Too soon.
The Mark Thompson Show.
When we come back, I do want to mention the next half hour, it's Tech Tuesday. Jefferson Graham is going to be here, and we will talk about several things. I do want to touch on the new iPhone again, which is available, I think, in next week at this time, on the 12th, in another week. Yeah.
Are you that guy that has to have the newest iPhone in your hand all the time?
No, this is the last. I'm 2 iterations behind, I think. I'm just the opposite. I'm like so worried about, well, am I going to lose Kim's contact information? Am I going to lose her text that she sent me? How about the picture of, Julia singing in the Fantastics or whatever the hell? Yeah. No, I'm like super afraid of losing things. So I have a problem actually turning it over, and they go, oh, well, don't worry about it. It backs up on the cloud. Yeah, okay. Anyway, Jeff's coming along, and David Cay Johnston, as I mentioned. And the other thing I haven't mentioned to you quickly, let me just mention this to you now. We have a cool conversation. Is it in the last half hour that Scott's going to be here?
Yeah, after 12, the 12:30 news. Mm-hmm.
He's done a book called Inside. Scott Hoffman is his name. And he looks at an organized crime family on the south side of Chicago. It rose to power during Prohibition, this crime family, and involved in a bunch of different illegal pursuits, of course. And the book is based, I think, on his personal perspective on this stuff. I mean, he grew up with his dad in the mafia.
That's right.
In the 50s and 60s in Chicago, which was like the epicenter of the mob. So we'll talk to him about that and then about his new book. And I think that's going to be an intriguing, a different kind of conversation. So we'll do that in the last half hour of the show. Smash the like button like a boss.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Yeah, smash it with your iron rod. Smash it hard. We'll do it live. We're doing the whole thing.
We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
All right. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and this report is sponsored by Coachella Valley Coffee. Let's start, though, with Mark Meadows. He has pleaded not guilty to election interference charges in Georgia. The former Trump White House chief of staff and 5 other co-defendants waived their rights to formal arraignments and pleaded not guilty today. 18 of the 19 defendants in the case, including former President Trump, have entered not guilty pleas to racketeering charges in this case. The United Auto Workers Union president says he is shocked, I say, current President Biden's comment that an auto workers strike won't happen. On Labor Day, President Biden said he's not worried about a UAW strike against the Detroit 3 automakers. He said it's just not going to happen. The union leaders are pushing for 40 hours pay for a 32-hour work week and 46% pay raises by September 14th, or they say workers will hit the picket lines.
Trevor, I think I'm shocked. Shocked, I say, might be a drop. I mean, I don't know what you can do with it.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Right. We're always looking at Kim. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. There's some bad doings in Chicago over the Labor Day weekend. Chicago police say this is a really, really violent holiday weekend. 44 people were shot in Chicago over the Labor Day weekend in separate shootings. 10 of them were killed. So 44 shot, 10 killed. And as you can see by the crawl on the screen here, a 6-year-old boy, also a 13-year-old boy were among those wounded in these shootings.
Jesus, just so brutal.
Yeah, it's a lot. Here in California, the climate change has amped up the risk of explosive wildfire. Research from Berkeley's Breakthrough Institute targeted the relationship between temperature and extreme fire growth, and they found climate change raised the risk of extreme daily wildfire growth by an average of 25%. That's big. The Institute's co-director, Patrick Brown, says it's important to look at more direct, on-the-ground solutions to protect the problem, like fuel reduction. He said the higher temperatures alone don't increase fire danger. They do so by drying out vegetation. A new phase of research will assess the effect of prescribed burning and the mechanical thinning on wildfire danger.
So, that's interesting. Huh.
Yeah. Students entering college this year, having some problems. They're struggling with basic math. College is mostly blaming COVID disruptions. Temple University's math chair says it's not just that these college kids are unprepared. He says they're almost damaged. Biology and engineering students struggle to understand fractions and exponents. Some students are being placed into pre-college math, starting a semester or more behind their program's requirements. Reading and math scores nosedived on some national tests, dropping below what's been seen in several decades. Maybe you have to take some remedial classes, get people back up to speed, just the way it goes
that's
sometimes.
Wild. But I mean, that's actually a really constructive suggestion to make these remedial classes available. It may just be a little lift that a lot of these kids need.
Yeah, I mean, they have to, if we're going to replace the current biologists and the current mathematicians, then we have to have students that are ready to go. So if you need to go back in time and retake and rethink some of this stuff, then that's what you have to do. I don't know I don't know if there's any other way around it.
Time and retake and rethink some of these things.
Yeah,
I don't mind it. I mean, I'll rent a bus and I'll take people with me. Any of those kids who are struggling. I don't know. Don't you feel like you need to? I don't know. I'd like to go back through the whole thing again. It's the old line: "Youth is wasted on the young." I would love to go back into school and actually study this time.
Yeah, that would be great. We'd love for you to study. I think if
we'd like for you to go anywhere, Mark. Would you go anywhere?
Methinks that if you were studying at the fine institutions in England, that you probably studied quite well. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's true. Of course, I forgot. Mm-hmm. I was educated at Oxford.
Thank you.
Do you know who I am?
Yes, thank you very much.
I'm kind of a big deal.
Go ahead.
Scientists say they have pinpointed the time ancient humanity was almost wiped out. What? An analysis published in the journal Science shows the human population dropped to just over 1,200 reproducing individuals 900,000 years ago. I don't know how they say it's only 1,200 reproducing individuals. I don't know how they know that. But apparently they say that population...
That's exactly what I want to know. What do you mean you don't know that?
It stayed that small for 100,000 years. So for 100,000 years, there were only 1,200 reproducing individuals. The study shows nearly 99% of human ancestors were lost. A senior author of the study, who's a scientist at a Chinese university, said in a statement, the findings open the door to many questions, including where the individuals lived, how they overcame the catastrophic climate changes, and whether natural selection during the bottleneck has accelerated the evolution of the human brain. Okay.
There have been studies over the last couple of years that suggest that migration patterns between Polynesian people and Native American people, that those migration patterns and those cross-pollinations of those different peoples, that informed a lot of development. But I haven't read that this is really interesting, that 1,200 people literally populated the world that recently? The population was down to that recently. Wow.
900,000 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
900,000 years ago. I'm thinking too, and this is the last thing, and I won't interrupt anymore. I've got Jeff waiting.
Yeah.
But, it makes sense because most of the populated world died. 90% or 95% of human beings that long ago died. They died of, everybody dies, but I'm talking about died young, died in childbirth, died of abscessed teeth, died of, the teeth probably killed, a ton of people, and died of what? Of epidemic, of pandemic. By a lot. They were serving up pandemics and epidemics like short order chefs. It was crazy. They just was tremendous disease. So when I actually reflect on it, it makes sense that we were down to like our starting 1,200 before we were able to repopulate the land.
Okay,
anyway,
that's great. Yeah. I'm glad to see that you agree with the study.
I've done a lot of research with Dr. Emil Schopenhausen.
Emil Schopenhausen.
The third. Yeah, and that was some of our research we did together.
The flamingos. Oh, Hurricane Idalia displaced many people as it hit Florida before it moved north, but animals were displaced as well, including Florida's iconic pink flamingo. There are reports of flamingos being seen in Ohio, Tennessee, and Virginia. One was even photographed in Moorhead, Kentucky. Fish and wildlife officials expect the bird to eventually make its way back home. But yeah, the flamingos had to scatter away. They're so cute and pretty. Love them.
They are cute. They're beautiful. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Of course.
Lastly, I will tell you there's the new union, as we, sometimes we talk about death, but now we're talking about love and life. Los Angeles Lakers owner Jeannie Buss quietly tying the knot with comedian Jay Moore on Sunday.
How about that?
Straight up, right in, no problem.
Okay.
Wow. You get right to it. About 20 people attended the private ceremony in Malibu. No Lakers players attended this one. Buss and Moore have been dating for 6 years, got engaged in December, and then married on Sunday. So congratulations to them. Look at that.
Yeah, that's very, very cool.
There's a level of passion that I've never seen.
There's a level of passion. Well, that's cool. That's nice to have passion, but you got to have a lot of other stuff besides passion. I hope those two kids can
make it work.
Going. Do you, how old is she again, please, Kim? I don't mean to make it about age, but
I didn't give an age. I'm sorry, but I don't have an age.
She might be 60-something or 50-something, late 50s, and he's younger. But I think that I love that.
Wow.
She's.
I think you're making about age there. I don't know.
No, and then I'm about to segue to something else, which is that she has maybe $2 billion, something on that order, and he has, I think, his net worth maybe around I don't know, 5 million, 6 million. So there's that too.
She doesn't look like she's in her 60s. I'm just gonna say.
Well, it's a Googleable thing.
Yeah, she's 61 on the screen.
Yeah,
is she
thank
really?
you very much.
Wow.
I'll take my yeah.
I wasn't making it about age, you see.
I see, but would you like to say you stand corrected?
Okay, no, I would not. But listen, I
stand corrected.
All right, I can't believe it. You said she doesn't look about. You challenged me in your own little side windy way, and you don't want to apologize.
But listen, if it had been him that was older and had all the moolah,
right,
then we wouldn't be. It would just be a normal thing.
No, I would draw attention. Are you kidding? I would draw attention to it just as much.
She is the one that's loaded.
No.
Then all of a sudden it's like,
you're reading a lot into it. I think you owe me. I think you ought to apologize to the Asian community, to be perfectly honest.
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community,
I'm just being honest
Asian American community.
I think you're out of bounds, Kim. You're out of bounds.
Kim, how are you?
All right. So
to apologize to the Mark Thompson community, and all this over just wishing them good wishes and luck and love. Really? You open a Mark Thompson can of worms?
I don't have room for best wishes and love on this show. There's no room for. You want that? Go to Marianne Williamson's show. That's not what I'm about.
Mark
Thanks,
Thompson
Tony,
Show.
by the way. Thanks. Oh, is it Tom?
Who?
Tom
What?
Gunn, what up? My favorite
Tom.
gun is the
Yeah.
Tom Gunn.
Big shout out.
Yeah, big shout out. Thanks for the $5.
I
and
also
super
enjoy the
sticker.
Tom Gunn. I do want to say that this show is this newscast. See of me discombobulated here is sponsored by the Coachella Valley Coffee Company, and it's the best coffee Mark Thompson has ever consumed in his life.
It's fantastic.
It is fantastic.
They make
And that's no lie, baby. No lie.
They make some lovely tea as well. And so if you check it out, you go to CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And if you decide to purchase, you get 10% across the board by using the code MARKT, altogether no spaces, MARKT, for your exclusive 10% off from the Mark Thompson Show.
It is true that you should knock around on that site and see what you like. Get the bean that's right for you. There are a lot of tasting notes and that kind of thing, and you can get it all. And then whatever you get, I get a couple of pounds of coffee at a time, sometimes a 5-pound bag, because I think that's the best value. But that's fresh crop. That's the beauty of Coachella Valley, and all of the beans are hand roasted. It's the only coffee that I'll serve in my house. I have a lot of different beans from their site, and I have a lot of different grinds also. The pour over, the regular brew, and then, of course, the espresso. But you'll love it. Go to CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, and when you check out, use the code MARKT for 10% off. There you have it.
It's the good stuff.
Yeah, baby.
I'm Kim McAllister on The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Yeah, you know it. You know it. Love our Tuesdays. We get a chance to visit with a guy who's our dear brother, our YouTube brother. How about it for Jefferson Graham, the longtime tech writer? He's now left USA Today, where he was writing about technology. He's left them behind. Now he's all about Photo Walks TV. And, you touched on the fact that there's this new iPhone coming out, Jefferson Graham.
Yeah, a week from today.
Can you remind us, is this a good thing? Do we like it, or do we think
well,
that there
first of all,
we
don't know anything until they officially announce it, but we're assuming that it's more powerful, it's faster, it's more expensive, it's got a better camera. We know it's going to have USB down here, USB-C instead of Lightning, and we don't know what else is going to be there. But it's next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time during Nikki's show and during your show as well, because they go for about 2 hours.
Oh, well,
But by this time next week, I should be able to pop in and give
that's kind of what I'm getting at. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do you used to physically go to the big unveiling, didn't you?
Yes, I will not be at this one. They don't have room for me, sadly.
Well, I think you might have caught yourself a break there. Now, something else is happening in the world of streaming. There is a constant mix of stories when it comes to streaming. People cutting the cord, people recalibrating, what streaming services they need, what's offered on different streaming services. And a version of that conversation or thinking is going on the streamer side. They're trying to figure out a way to navigate through all of this as well. So into that mix comes this latest thing with Charter Communications and Disney, and they're into it. I wonder if you could explain just briefly, the carriage fees and this kind of thing, and help us understand the friction and where it might end up for the consumer, what our alternatives are to cable, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, this happens every few months. Cable companies fighting with the program distributors. The programmers want more money, and the cable companies don't want to pay the extra money because they're losing customers all the time.
So just to be clear about it, though, the money is paid. You're saying when they want more money for the cable company to be able to carry their products on their cable line. In effect, it's a carriage fee, is what they call it.
For instance, even though ESPN ratings are down and CNN ratings are down and MSNBC ratings are down and Bravo and all those networks, they've been making money because the cable operators pay them $5, $10, $20, whatever, monthly for the right to carry their networks on cable TV. And,
so
yeah,
you're saying this back and forth now over how much they'll pay has led to this moment, and what's happened in this moment?
And what's different about this moment is Charter said, we don't want to pay extra money. Charter is Spectrum in the Los Angeles area, by the way, but we don't want to pay extra money anymore. In fact, we don't want to ding our customers with sports fees when they don't even watch the sports channel. They shouldn't have to do that. I don't know if you're aware of how high a percentage of your cable bill goes to paying the sports fees, but I looked up this morning for Spectrum, for Charter Spectrum in the Los Angeles area. Mark, of $100 bill, how much of that goes to sports fees?
I would guess, well, now that you've said it, I guess higher, but I would have guessed $20, $25.
$20.30 actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So
it's a lot. It's a lot. You're saying,
well, particularly if you don't watch it. I know that a lot of people really love it, and they were very upset when.
Sure, but if you're not a sports fan, then whatever. Yeah.
They want to see the U.S. Open, and all of a sudden it's not there. It's blacked out.
So that's the point. You're not now Disney, which owns ESPN and all those. They're saying, okay, forget it. We're not going to see how you like it. Your cable without our product is essentially what they're saying, right?
Yeah, and it's not just the U.S. Open. It's the U.S. Open, and it's football games, and it's Jeopardy, and it's Dancing with the Stars, and it's FX, and it's the Disney Channel, and there's a lot of stuff out there. So
now, is this just in Los Angeles or the Southern California area?
Nationally.
Nationally.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
And so, this has become a big battle, and they're basically saying, we're just not going to live this way anymore with the declining population. Now, my cable company, my local cable company is named Frontier. They paid, I think, $2 or $3 billion to buy these systems from Verizon and to offer cable TV and internet. For the last year, they haven't even offered cable TV anymore. It's not even an option. Because so few people want it at this point, and they make so little on it because the programming fees go up every year. So I think what our listeners and our viewers are going to have to come to terms with is they're going to have to change the way they do things. I don't think that cable TV is a given that pay TV is going to be there for them. And they're going to have to start shopping around for alternatives. And I can give you the list.
Yeah, okay, that'll be good.
Okay, we'll start.
By the way, Tony, are you telling me, because this is scandalous if this is true, you're telling me that the host of Photo Walks is out of focus right now?
It just came back into focus.
Okay, all right.
Thanks, Tony.
There you go. He just came back because that was
a new camera tomorrow. Sometimes I have to hold my hand up.
You do the whole hand thing.
Very well done.
New camera coming tomorrow.
He's still not as pasty white as I am, even though Jefferson Graham has not a cadaverous pallor, but a lighter pallor than do I. I have the truly ghost-like pallor, so I'll always make you look good. Go ahead, Jeff. So what are the alternatives?
So the most expensive is cable TV. If you take the website at their word, for Spectrum, it starts at $105 a month. That doesn't include internet. This is $105 for pay TV. Got that? And then next would be DirecTV at $90. And a lot of that fee is renting equipment. For both of the services.
Right, you lease the equipment from them, right?
Next, sports fans, Fubo, Fubo, is another streaming service that will give you all the sports packages that you want. That's $75 a month. After that,
that's terrific.
Save $2 and you can get YouTube TV for $73 monthly. I know Mark gets that. And they have a lot of the same sports as well. And then Hulu with live television is $70. Those are sort of the main players. And then there's Sling TV. Sling TV is $40. You'll get some of what you want, some of what you don't want. But if you're like a news junkie, you can still get MSNBC, CNN, and Fox on Sling TV. For $40 a month. So those are your options. And then there's the antenna. The antenna of today is not the antenna of yesterday. They come with little receivers. I get all the local channels.
You get the local channels. You're not going to get, if you want to watch the U.S. Open on ESPN, you're not going to get that through the antenna.
Of course not.
Right.
No, it's for broadcast TV.
Okay.
And broadcast TV only. You're not going to get the sports. But if you can live without them, and like my mother was very upset, she couldn't watch Jeopardy. So she had to get an antenna. She doesn't care about the U.S. Open. But anyway, those are pretty much the options right now.
Please keep us posted on your mom's viewing habits, because they sound like they do coincide with some of our own audiences based on what I'm seeing in the chat, their own appetites. So
yeah, and she did advise that Jeopardy's in reruns now, so it's not as important.
Okay. One of the problems with YouTube TV, if I can say, because I really like it, it's a little hard to navigate at times. You know, it's a little hard to find like what you've recorded, and I think it's actually easier to navigate on an iPad or an iPhone than it is on the big TV. So I don't know why that is, but it is.
It's a different way of watching television. The days of you with the remote control going up and down in the menu guide, that seems to be gone. Right.
And my tendency to want that, you know what I mean, is perhaps what I'm fighting. You know what I mean? But you're exactly right, Jefferson Graham. That guide is what I miss, and going up and down. Surfing is what I miss.
Yeah, right.
All right. Give me a quick, want to mention your Photo Walks TV YouTube series is up. The last I saw, it's your Western, it's kind of your Western series.
Yes. So we were in Moab, Utah last weekend, and that's Moab. And this weekend we'll be in Prescott, Arizona. I'm editing the final finale, which is Boulder. And then I'm headed out on the road next week, and I'll be shooting some new stuff.
You're amazing. I love your stuff. And it's the trip I want to take. I always want to. Courtney wants to drag me to Italy here in a couple of weeks.
That's great too. Gelato every day for $1.
Yeah, but I want to drag myself to the West, you know. But anyway.
Well, it's a lot closer. You know, one of the best comments that I got on the recent series was, you know, these people that they go to Europe and they spend fortunes to go all over the place, when look at what's right in our backyard.
That's what I feel. That's exactly what I'm saying. So thanks so much, Jeff. Love talking to you, and look forward to your next visit. Jefferson Graham, everybody. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Big hour ahead. David Cay Johnston, the Pulitzer Prize winner, will join us in just a moment. And then this new book on the mafia in Chicago, written by a guy whose dad was in the mob. It's fascinating. And he'll bring it all to life for us in the second half of the next hour. So that's still to come. Tony, do I need to do anything else before I bring David on?
We're good.
Okay. Without any further delay, how about
The Mark Thompson Show.
How about a warm welcome for a guy who's a Pulitzer Prize winner, 4-time best-selling author, and when it comes to government, when it comes to taxes, when it comes to world events, and certainly when it comes to Donald Trump, no one has chronicled it all the way David Cay Johnston has. How about it, David Cay Johnston? Hi, David.
Hello, Mark.
I was telling everybody I sent you a passel of stuff because there's so much going on. And in Trump land, where we kind of oftentimes end up one way or the other, it looks like Mark Meadows spent a lot of time talking, and maybe in so talking, he has confused his role as White House Chief of Staff with the role of someone who's running lead on the Trump campaign. And that's important when it comes to his trial in Georgia, I guess. That's my understanding.
Yes, I think that Mark Meadows has walked himself straight into a Hatch Act violation if Jack Smith wanted to charge that. The Hatch Act prevents people from using their federal office for campaign purposes. So politicians will have two phones, members of Congress, and when they want to call donors, they use the other phone that isn't their government-issued phone or their expense-accounted phone. And Meadows taking the position that what he did in Atlanta when he physically went there, ostensibly to see his grown children, was to assert that he was acting on behalf of the White House in his capacity of chief of staff to the office of the president. And I think in cross-examination, that got thoroughly demolished. And it raises, Mark, a fundamental question about the competency of the legal advice that Trump and some of the others are getting. Some of Trump's co-conspirators in various cases are getting lawyers paid for by Donald Trump. Cassidy Hutchinson, who blew the whistle to the January 6th committee, kept being told by a Trump-paid lawyer, just say, I don't recall. And then she got rid of that lawyer and came clean. And I think you're going to see more of this going forward, indications of legal advice that A, isn't very good, and B, helps Donald Trump more than the actual client.
The trial itself, I mean, it seemed inconceivable, and I guess maybe we were just so used to the can being kicked, which had been, I think, the case. I mean, this whole thing, the birthing process on all of these indictments, to me, was way slow. But all right,
yep.
Even the appointment of the J6 after J6, the appointment of Jack Smith, I thought was slow. But now it does seem as though, David, that in some weird way, maybe the pace of these trials will be such that they will be going on. Certainly the Georgia trials may be going on in some way before the election. Is that right?
Oh, no, I think that almost certain that the January 6th case brought by Jack Smith, which is against one defendant, Donald Trump, will go to trial before the 2024 fall elections and probably most of the primaries. I mean, right now it's scheduled for either the day before, I think it's the day before Super Tuesday, when about 8 states have voting. The next case likely to go to trial is Fani Willis's case. That will almost certainly be broken up into several defendants, which is, by the way, not unusual in a large conspiracy. When you have 19 defendants, it's not unusual that it's held through 2, 3, 4 trials, sometimes for the very practical reason of not having a courtroom big enough to accommodate 19 defendants and all of their lawyers. And 2 people, Sidney Powell and Chesborough, the lawyer, have both asked have both invoked their speedy trial rights, which in Georgia means that a jury must be sworn in by, it's not exactly Halloween, but it's a few days after that.
Far afield from this is something else going on that I wanted to ask you about. And it's a flavor of what the GOP has done now. Sorry to say, GOPers, I mean no insult, but I think your party has lost its way. There are no reasonable arguments being made or philosophies or discourses about policy any longer. It's all now about a power grab. And what's happened in Wisconsin and what is happening in, I think, North Carolina along the same lines is a part of this. As I say, it's a flavor of this. And the GOP, which, again, I would mention this in the last hour, but just to reiterate for people who are just joining us, it's a heavily gerrymandered state, Wisconsin. I mean, insanely gerrymandered, so that you don't really have a chance as a Democrat to take control of the legislature. They have a supermajority in the legislature. Anyway, they finally get a more liberal judge in there in Wisconsin. And now, after losing, again, this is a very high-profile case to get this judge in, and then I'll wrap up and shut up and let David talk. They now are taking steps to actually get rid of this judge or take away her power. The Republicans in Wisconsin want to essentially undercut her ability to get anything done at all. They want to get rid of her, and it's an extraordinary move that I think we're seeing more of, David, like a seizing of power, essentially.
We're all across the country where Republicans have a shot at maintaining control through things like gerrymandering, we're seeing these things. In Tennessee, we saw 2 black legislators who were kicked out. They were then reinstated by the local authorities who had the power to do so, and then they ran for election and both got put in again. Notably, both of them were black. A white woman in the legislature who was with them doing the same stuff was not removed, which sort of goes to the fundamental racist nature of this. In Alabama, the redistricting is so heavily gerrymandered that a federal judge said, no, this is depriving black Alabamans of representation. You need to draw districts that make it possible to have 2 of the 7 districts be black. So the legislature went right back and drew again a map that would limit it to 1 black lawmaker. And that's now been thrown out.
In other words, they didn't honor the decision. They just went back.
Correct. That's correct. And it's not unheard of for politicians in American history to say, we're not going to enforce that. There have been throughout after the 1954 Brown v. Board of Education decision, there were all sorts of politicians who said, you want the schools integrated? Yeah, well, how are you going to do it? We're not going to do it. And in 1957, President Eisenhower sent the 101st Airborne Division to Little Rock so that black children could go to school there at the Central High School. So this is a pattern that we're seeing all around the country. And Republicans are a minority party, and they are shrinking as a share of the population. The polls that are telling people that as many people will vote for Donald Trump as for Joe Biden, I think, are not to be believed, partly because when related questions are asked, the Trump support falls away very rapidly.
Certainly when policy questions are asked, there's no support. Right.
Yes, that's exactly what happens. But I think you're going to see more of this for a while from Republicans who, rather than abandoning their unpopular policies, controlling women, many of them now openly speaking about banning birth control, and lowering taxes even more on the very rich, and cutting benefits, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, in California, Medi-Cal. I think you're going to see more of this, but these are sort of the gasps of a dying group of organization that doesn't have enough popular support. So it's got to find ways to get around the concept of democracy, which is the majority rules with protections for the minority against abuse.
This is a comment that is interesting to me for a couple of reasons. Karen says, let me get my credibility glasses on so I can read it clearly. Maybe it's only the Trump faction. We really shouldn't lump them all together when talking about the GOP, but I don't think it's not just the Trump faction, David. I don't think. No,
well, Ms. Cooper, I would argue that given that almost no leading Republican will stand up to the Trumpers, that it's not unfair to label the whole party this way. Asa Hutchinson, very conservative, former prosecutor, congressman, and governor of Arkansas, who is a competent manager. If you're going to have someone in the group that was in the debate be president, we know that Asa Hutchinson is a competent manager, and he does not have a history of going after, as governor, his political enemies in inappropriate ways. But that's not true of any of the rest of them, including Chris Christie, who was attorney general, go after Republicans who didn't toe the line and Democrats left and right in New Jersey. And if you won't stand up to the Trump lies, if you won't stand up to the ridiculous claims that January 6th was just tourists coming to the Capitol, then I think you're reasonably tied to them. Let's remember it was the Republicans who, when I was in diapers born 70 years ago, who came up with fellow travelers. You didn't have to be a member of the Communist Party of the U.S., but there were lots of people who they dated somebody once who was a member of the party, or they appeared in the same movie with them or on the same radio show. That made you a fellow traveler, and the Republicans would denounce you for that. So given the Republican Party's history of doing this, I really do think it's fair. The people to be distinguished are those Republicans, a tiny minority of Republican leaders who have stood up to the Trumpers and said, this has to stop.
There's a school of thought with the coming election as it pertains to issues that don't get talked about, right? The issues that don't get talked about are, gains that the Biden administration has made in the infrastructure area, negotiating down these drug prices, which has never been done. It's always been promised, but no one's actually gotten it done. There's infrastructure money going throughout the United States that red states and blue states are benefiting from. You find the ridiculousness of Florida, where DeSantis turns down the $350 million because it comes from the feds. I mean, that is absurd. It hurts the very people you're supposedly supposed to represent, et cetera. But into this mix, seldom is it talked about, I find, in GOP circles when they go on the Sunday chat shows, and when they go even out on the stump and talking in any interview, they talk. It seems they gravitate toward the 2020 election, Donald Trump. Do you think Biden is president? It's like it over and over and over again, and then they will get into Hunter Biden. I mean, talking about in response to whatever the president is charged with. So the Hunter Biden thing, this is the argument, is not as powerful an argument in the months ahead because it points to malfeasance or illegality or questionable pay-to-play type situations implied by Hunter Biden's access, when the reality is the opposing candidate, Trump, has way more of a history littered with that kind of thing than does the Biden administration. That's the argument. Like, stop mentioning Hunter because it's bringing spotlight to us in bad ways.
It's to the minority of Republicans who are total Trumpers, of course, that doesn't matter because their leader can do no wrong. As Donald Trump himself said when he was asked by a radio talk show host named Bob Lonsbury here where I live in Rochester, New York, well, as a Christian, when was the last time you asked God for forgiveness? And Trump goes, ask God for forgiveness? I've never, ever asked God for forgiveness. I've never done anything in my life that would require asking for forgiveness. I mean, what more do you need to know about the nature of who you're dealing with? I don't know how effective the Hunter Biden issues will be. I mean, there is, after all, a U.S. attorney who's now been made special counsel pursuing Hunter Biden. The Republicans keep saying that Joe Biden took, I think it was a $5 or $50 million bribe, and whatever, not that much money in the scheme of Trumpian things. But they haven't come up with a single witness. I mean, they've come up with a guy who turns out to be a Chinese agent, may yet be charged with being a Chinese spy, and they've come up with somebody else who sort of disappeared on them. So how much that sticks, I don't know. Biden is finally out there touting the infrastructure projects, the work that's being done. He made fun over the Labor Day weekend of Trump saying, here's a builder who didn't build anything while he was in the White House. There's a picture that's being circulated asserting that the Biden administration opened a part of the wall or fencing anyway between us and Mexico. Well, it's a part that is designed for flooding and is intended to be opened so that you don't cause terrible other damage. But to people who aren't interested in sophisticated thinking, even, high school level sophisticated thinking, that's not going to get you anywhere.
Is the body politic, David, influenced now in America by anything that you would point to? Like, is there a bellwether from a media standpoint? Is it, if CNN says something, if the Wall Street Journal says something, are we just also fractured? And then there's also YouTube platforms. A lot of people follow, Joe Rogan or et cetera. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. When I was growing up, when your generation was growing up, there were basically the 3 TV networks. And we had these common bonds of things we watched and knew about. And that's no longer true. 500 television channels not only means that different people watch totally different things, but it also means that the quality of a lot of television has gone way downhill. Back in the 90s when CSI came out, a very smart idea for a TV show about the forensic lab in Las Vegas, I wrote up a proposed story budget at the New York Times because I called out there where I knew cops and found out that the budget for the crime lab in Las Vegas, the surrounding county, they have a metro police department, was smaller than the budget for one episode of the TV show.
Wow.
And they didn't have the same sophisticated tools and things that are on the TV show. And
That's a great fact.
Yeah, unfortunately, an editor shot it down, so we never did that story. But it is there's a fundamental shift going on because there are so many different voices, and you can just be in an echo chamber and only hear what you want to hear. And I think that's a real challenge to democracy. It's the institutions have held up pretty well, but I think we're going to find out in the 2024 elections at every level how many people have an understanding of the fundamental nature of what we're supposed to do in a democracy. We're supposed to act based on reason, on vigorous, robust debate. That doesn't mean it has to be polite by any means, and to elect people who are going to serve us, not themselves.
This point, my city is finally repaving our streets, fixing curbs. Caltrans just repaved 3 miles of I-80 this weekend, which will last 40 years. Thanks, Joe. Yeah. There you go. This is interesting, though, also, David, and there's some, this is a constant source of vexation for me. Russ says, cable evangelicals sure are pushing getting out to vote Republican. Revoke tax-exempt status. It is galling. And you know so much about the tax code and dodging it, and sort of the way you've written books on the way the haves essentially take advantage of all these different and invent tax breaks, while the have-nots not as much.
They pay for them.
Yeah, they pay. Thank you. That we pay for them. What about the evangelicals and church tax exempt status has always been crazy to me, since they're really just American mullahs.
Well, this is not limited to the Christian nationalist type groups that preach something that I can't find anything supporting it in the Bible. Revenge, hatred, oppression of others, turning people away, letting people die in the desert by making it a crime to give them water or food. But let's remember that black churches have a very long history of going to vote after Sunday services and having politicians come to churches. So if you want to go after this issue, I think you have to be even-handed about it all the way around. And I would argue that nonprofits, and I was the first journalist to create a hard news beat covering nonprofits. That was when I was at the LA Times, and trained the Chronicle of Philanthropy staff and was a columnist for them for years. So I have a deep history with the nonprofits. I think that we do need to rethink the law. It's a perfectly good reason that we don't pay income taxes if you're a nonprofit, but should you pay property taxes? I mean, where I live, the University of Rochester owns probably $1 billion worth of property in the city of Rochester, a poor city, and it doesn't pay any property taxes except on a shopping center that it owns. Should churches and YMCAs and YWCAs and the like at least pay some minimal amount, not the amount for schools perhaps, but to cover fire and police and other basic services, which is around, Pittsburgh does this, and it's around, I think they charge 22% of what everybody else pays. And that's just part of, my whole thing, that we need to fundamentally rethink white collar law in America, not just white collar crime law, but all kinds of white collar laws dealing with pricing, monopolies, contracts, scams, and unfortunately, law professors, and I'm only a lecturer. I'm not a lawyer, but I teach law, but I'm not a tenured academic. Their rewards are for dealing with fine points and details, not with, hey, let's sit down and white collar law in America and see what we come up with. Because I think we could come up with something vastly better than we have, that is more economically efficient, encourages good behavior, punishes bad behavior. And that's a fundamental thing we've lost sight of. We can design laws that are self-reinforcing of virtuous behavior and self-punishing of vicious behavior. And I've written about articles showing examples of this in the past. And I think we need to really focus on that, because you don't want to have a huge police force and regulatory force if you don't have to have one.
Sure. Go ahead, Kim.
I just saw the story. I thought I'd throw it at you. And I wonder if studies like this are an evidence that maybe Trump could use, or his defense attorneys could use, in saying he can't get a fair trial in DC and that it needs to be moved. And here's the story. Close to 2 in 3 Washington, D.C. residents say they believe President Trump is guilty in the federal case over his attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. According to an Emerson College polling survey, 64% of D.C. residents said they'd vote to find Trump guilty. 8% said they'd find him innocent. About the same percentage of Republicans and Democrats, interestingly, say they think Trump will be found guilty, 61 and 60% respectively.
So, first of all, the Constitution requires that if you commit a federal crime, you be tried in the jurisdiction where the crime took place. And in the case of the January 6th charge, where Donald is the only defendant, it occurred in Washington, D.C. I mean, if you don't want to have that jury pool, don't commit the crime in that location.
Right.
Donald has asked that it be moved to West Virginia, which is the whitest state in the country, and was very strongly for him in both 16 and 20. I don't expect that to happen at all. I don't see any reason that would happen. And as for picking jurors, I've sat through lots of voir dires. There are people who don't know anything about these cases. There literally are. And fortunately, they sometimes tend to be the people picked on juries.
Yeah, that's scary in its own right, though, isn't it, David?
But judges,
Like, what rock do you have to be living under to not know about this case?
I don't mind people knowing about it. You just don't want a juror that's made up their mind about it already, right?
But through the voir dire process, judges can eliminate those people, except for the ones who are very good liars. That's why I think you're going to see 4 alternates instead of 2 in Trump's January 6th federal trial in Washington. So that if it turns out some juror wants to nullify the charge, they can be removed and replaced. But they'll pick a jury and get people who are appropriate to do this. I would be surprised if it took more than 2 weeks to pick a jury, but it could go on for 3 or 4 weeks, depending on the panels that they get of prospective jurors. When people are called to a jury panel, they read out a lot of people right away because you fill out forms and you're asked questions. And so anyway, if you don't want to be tried for a crime in a particular jurisdiction, if you're a black man who doesn't want to be charged with a crime in West Virginia, don't commit your crime in West Virginia. And the same thing is true for Donald Trump. That's where the crime took place.
I just think of myself, and maybe we all think of ourselves this way, as objective, evaluating the evidence. I can dump on Biden just like I can dump on Trump, whatever. So show me, if I were in the jury pool, I would go, yeah, I've seen all the information. Guys, I'm happy to sit here, and if the information is, persuades me of something else, I'm happy to acquit your client type thing. Is that the kind of juror that you end up with? Someone who, fancies themselves objective or whatever? You know what I'm saying?
Well, what people will be asked are things like, will you follow the law as instructed by the judge? Can you park your personal interests at the door? And in the voir dire process in federal court, they weed people out actually quite well. I wrote when I was in San Francisco for the LA Times in the 70s about a different problem that persists, which is in voir dire, we ask people all sorts of questions that have nothing to do with cases and are intrusive. And there was a fellow who challenged all of this, and he got nowhere except to, be heard by the courts. But the judge will be able to pick a jury that will be acceptable to both sides. Now, once this is all over, you can be sure that if Donald Trump is convicted, he will immediately claim that the fix was in and it was all unfair, because Donald will go to his grave insisting that he never did anything wrong. He never did anything that requires forgiveness.
Right. As noted by your by never needing the forgiveness from the Lord or whatever he said that you noted earlier. David, love our visits. Next week, I'd love to touch on what's going on in Ukraine, and we'll get to some of that. I know you have strong views about that, and I'd love to hear them. So that, and I'm sure there'll be other developments in many of these other things.
One little point on that: the war is actually going quite well right now for the Ukrainians. There have been more surrenders by Russian troops. And if the Ukrainians succeed in cutting off logistics, supplying food and ammunition and water to the Russian conscripts, once they know they're not going to get fed, guess what? They tend to run to the Ukrainians because if otherwise they're told basically fight to die. And this isn't their land. This isn't their family. So even without the air power they need, the Ukrainians are progressing ahead. And the people who study war, like the Institute for the Study of War, are all showing this in their daily reports.
All right. With that, we say farewell. Thank you, David. Yeah. David Cay Johnston, everybody. See you next week.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Shadow Stevens. This is the Mark Thompson Show. Give it to yourself.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Yeah, you know it. We're circling the bottom of the second hour. Home stretch ahead. It's going to be great. Good conversation with David, wide-reaching. I like that. Scott Hoffman, the author, is going to join us next. He's written a book about the mob in Chicago in the 60s and 70s particularly. Looks back a little bit at the mob and their hold on Chicago, how they got that hold. But the thing about his book that is particularly interesting is that his dad was in the mob. So he's not writing this book as an academic. He's writing this book as the son of a guy who was in the mafia.
What?
Yeah. So he'll talk about it. They called it The Outfit. And we'll talk about Scott's book. It's called Inside. And
so interesting.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that, and we'll get to that in a moment. We try to bring you stuff that's a little bit different along the way, and this, I think, falls into that category. So Kim's news, and then that. I did want to remind you to smash the like button, please, if you would.
With your iron rod.
And I wanted to get to an email, which I might be able to try to do. I'll tell you what, if I don't get to it now, which I don't think I'm going to, I'll get to it after our conversation with Scott. And then Trevor sent me those drops, the new drops of Kim.
Oh, no.
Yes, so we have those that I will preview for you.
Guys, working against me here.
I want to also acknowledge one passing that I didn't acknowledge because I was talking about Jimmy Buffett. That passing is another singer from the 70s. He did a song called Dreamweaver, and he did a song called Love is Alive. His name is Gary Wright. He was 80 years old. And his son confirmed he had Parkinson's disease and that Lewy body dementia. Very hard way to go, man. He was a founding member of Spooky Tooth, which is a British band, and was a session player on all of George Harrison's solo albums, Gary Wright was. He was very much in the mix for All Things Must Pass. And on Ringo Starr's early singles, Gary Wright played. And he was involved with Nilsson, Tim Rose, and B.B. King, and many others. Gary Wright was the real thing. But when he came up with this synthesizer-driven style of hit that was Dreamweaver, Steve Miller's Fly Like an Eagle is also very much informed by like a synthesizer-driven style. He vaulted to super high profile, and Dreamweaver was massive. And Gary Wright, this terrific musician, I guess made a surprise appearance in Wayne's World.
Oh yeah, that's how most people in my generation know that song.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I love that. I just love it.
As a matter of fact, I can't hear the lyrics to Dreamweaver without picturing Wayne's World.
Oh, that's super great.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Well, that's I didn't even wasn't even aware of that. Over the years, his songs have continued to be covered, they say. Chaka Khan recorded a blazing version of Love is Alive for her smash album, I Feel For You. And Jay-Z to Tone Loc to others have sampled Gary Wright's music. He passes away at 80 over the weekend, and I didn't want to neglect mentioning it. Seemed like a sad passing. You know, all my 70s heroes are passing away. So
this is Casey Kasem on American Top 40 in Hollywood.
I wanted to share a little bit of Gary Wright. He was a big part of my childhood, and now he's passed away, sadly.
Smash the like button like a boss.
With your iron rod.
Mark Thompson Show, Kim's News, and then we get into the mob next. Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. Let us begin with President Biden, again, to be wearing a mask indoors and around people. He will remove his mask while distanced from others inside and outside. That, according to the White House press secretary, who says also that First Lady Jill Biden is doing very well after being diagnosed with COVID. So now you can
That's
see
not
why
fake. That's
President
real.
Biden is having to wear the mask again, right? Congress,
he's a mask wearer.
Got to do it.
You know who is handling the situation? I guess they've flown in a doctor for this. Emil
Schaffhausen.
the third. Yes, is handling the Biden COVID situation, so we'll watch it.
Congress, of course, back in the nation's capital today after its summer break. There's a number of issues on the agenda, including a potential government shutdown looming in the coming weeks. Officials with the U.S. Marshal Service still looking for this fine fella, an escaped Pennsylvania inmate they think will be caught very soon. And Deputy Supervisor Rob Clark saying they're hopeful for a peaceful surrender because Danilo Cavalcante has been on the run for nearly a week now and may be tired of trying to hide in the woods. Officials say there have been 4 credible sightings.
I wondered why they said they expected him to be caught any minute now. You're saying just because they figure he's going to be tired of hiding.
It's hard out there in the woods, okay? He's tired. It's dirty.
Wow.
I don't know. Maybe better than life in prison.
Picnic, no summer camp.
True now, when you're running from the prison guards.
4 credible sightings thus far. The most recent Sunday afternoon in the woods.
How do these guys get out of prison to begin with?
He escaped.
A lot of guys get out of prison, I've noticed.
He escaped right after being sentenced to life. So,
yeah, well, that's the best time to do it.
I guess.
Or the worst time to do it. I don't know, but
during transport. Haven't you seen the movies? During transport.
Oh, right, of course.
No,
yeah.
I don't know if it was. I don't know.
He
if it was
murdered his ex-girlfriend, Vicky and Sausalito.
In front of her kids. Yeah, he's a bad guy.
Oh my God.
Really bad guy. So, there's a lot of other bad things that can happen to him in the woods. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe we should take him to Chicago and just dump him on the streets. See what happens then.
Oh.
Just saying. Oprah Winfrey and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson are facing criticism now from some people after asking for donations to help victims of the Maui wildfires. You'd think both of them, of course, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who hails from Hawaii, and Oprah, who has a big property up in Kula, where some of the fires burned, not down in Lahaina, but other fires in upcountry, have, are vested interest and love the people there. You would think it would be great. These two can put a public face to raising money. No, people complaining. Video posted on Instagram.
Who is having that conversation?
Okay, let Kim tell you. She'll tell you who's having it.
Video posted on Instagram by Oprah and The Rock asks viewers to donate to a relief fund that they just launched with $10 million of their own money. Well, some who commented on the video felt that wasn't enough, arguing Winfrey and Johnson can afford to donate much more than 10 mil and that they should be asking their millionaire friends, not common people, to donate.
God, it's unbelievable. This is the most critical culture on earth.
Can you believe what people can bitch about? Honestly.
Yes.
Please. If you don't want to donate, don't donate. Look away.
Yeah.
Right?
All the complaining. I don't get it.
You know, they do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
They do it. Casey gets it.
Elon Musk is blaming the Anti-Defamation League for lost advertising revenue on X, formerly known as Twitter. In a post yesterday, he alleged the ADL has been trying to, quote, kill this platform by falsely accusing it and me of being anti-Semitic. Well, the tech mogul says he is pro-free speech, but against anti-Semitism of any kind. Musk also indicated he was considering legal action against the Anti-Defamation League. And they noted Monday, the ADL, they won't be commenting on any legal threats. So, yeah, we're not going to comment on that. That's what they say. Not doing it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a platform for so much hate. I mean, and I think Musk himself is, when it comes to positions on race and religion and ethnicity, I think he comes from, sort of a questionable background, certainly, and his posture on these things is not what it should be. That for another time, but
just a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I'll wrap it up because I know we have a guest coming on. I'll say healthcare workers rallied in Oakland and across California on Labor Day, trying to call on one of the state's major medical companies, Kaiser, to provide better wages and staffing levels. In Oakland, a crowd of organizers exceeded 1,000, said they're ready to organize the biggest healthcare worker strike in U.S. history. Workers say they're struggling to make ends meet. They're burnt out from the pandemic. Congresswoman Barbara Lee joined the protesters at Kaiser's Oakland Medical Center. And I will end it with telling you about actor Gary Busey, who apparently had a bit of a problem. He was involved in what police are calling a hit-and-run accident over the weekend, unfortunately. According to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies, the accident happened on the Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu, actually last week. A woman who was in the other vehicle, called TMZ, spoke to them. She said she was driving on the PCH when Busey pulled out of a shopping center and hit her vehicle and drove away. The woman followed him, turned on her cell phone camera, began shouting at the 79-year-old actor to pull over. Busey eventually did so, but according to the woman, refused to share insurance information. He can be heard in the video saying, "I'm private." Okay.
Maybe tomorrow we'll run that video.
You have the "I'm private" video? Yeah. He can then be seen getting back into his car and driving away. The Malibu Lost Hills Sheriff's Office continues to investigate.
I mean, the Malibu Lost Hills Sheriff's Office has to be in the regular business of corralling famous drunk people. And
That's right.
I think that really never stops when you're in that Malibu world. But Busey is definitely out there, even when he's stone cold sober.
I'm Kim McAllister. This is The Mark Thompson Show.
Okay.
The Mark Thompson Show.
My wife wants some vegetables for crudité.
I was a basketball referee.
Feels great, baby.
Use Mark Thompson. It's unbelievably offensive.
What he's got going here is a situation.
I was fortunate. Everyone I worked with made me better at my job.
You are a cover-up artist, and you are a liar.
Yeah. We are in the home stretch. So glad you could be with us. Mark Thompson Show with Kim, with Tony. Albert will be in tomorrow in our regular cast and crew. So grateful for your support. Smash the like button. It's free.
With your iron rod.
And the thumbs up helps us in the algorithms of YouTube. And many of you have signed on as Patreon and PayPal supporters. And I wanted to let you know that Tony updated the roll. So at the end of the show, we try to honor you at the end of every show because you are responsible for every show getting on the air. Truly, we are crowd-funded. I was putting a back and forth together with a listener over the weekend who said you should get these sponsors and those sponsors. It's very hard to get sponsors for a show like ours, and it is exciting to have the sponsors that we do even occasionally swim through our world. But we are listener-supported, so when the listeners go away with their support, we go away. And even if our support drops to a certain level, I just can't keep the thing going anymore. So I appreciate everybody who is part of our Patreon and PayPal community, and even those of you, of course, who throw in super stickers and super chats. Every little bit helps us. So appreciate that. But Tony's updated the list is the point that runs at the end of the show.
Thanks, Tony.
So that will be something that that you'll see at the end of this show. Now, special guest. So let me get into it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
You know, the mafia, there's a romanticized view of the mafia through film, mostly also through literature. You know, there's something so bad, but there's again something so alluring and seductive about that underworld. And there's a new book, it's called Inside, by Scott Hoffman. And he looks at the internal workings of what's called the Outfit. It's a crime family that originated on the south side of Chicago during Prohibition, but then rose to power and got into drug trafficking and prostitution and money laundering and political corruption and murder. I mean, it's Chicago, for God's sake. And in the 50s and 60s, they really just spread their tentacles. And this is the story of his father, who was in the mob. And I want to talk to him about what that was like, the mob in that world, why he never got into that himself. Often people can be seduced when their father's in the mob in this case, or in any business. They oftentimes follow their footsteps. So with that lengthy preamble, let me bring him on now. Scott Hoffman, everybody. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Mark. Nice to see you and your listeners.
Yeah. Scott, tell me about your dad and tell me about how he ended up in the mafia in Chicago.
Well, my father was originally born in Milwaukee, okay? And when he was 2 years old and his brother was 6 months old, his father died. And his mother who was a seamstress, had relatives in Chicago and moved to the west side of Chicago to live in a 2-flat building, or duplex, you know, what you might call, because one of her relatives had an apartment available for her. So he started out on the west side, you know, where he grew up. And my father's introduction really was with Sam Giancana, who at that time was about my father's age, you know, well, a little older, obviously. They met in their teens. And he had a group known as the 42s. And the 42s were, they would hang out at a cafe called 42nd Street, which I think was in a way kind of played out the like Broadway 42nd Street. And one day my father was going across to it was a Jewish community center. He was on the swim team. He was about 16 years old. And Sam Giancana says, it's going to be 3 pennies for you to cross the street. One of those days, 3 pennies was a lot of money. And he told Sam Giancana, no, I'm not giving you 3 pennies. And Sam Giancana took out a little knife, stuck it in my father's hand. So my father went home, just pulled it out, put a little, I guess, rubbing alcohol. And the next day he went back because the swimming team had practice. And Sam Giancana and the 42s, all the guys there, Felix Aldericio, Sam DiStefano, all the guys who were part of that crew were there. And Sam Giancana says, well, you know, it's 3 pennies. My father says, well, I got one thing for you. And he punched him. He knocked him down. And the 42 started to close in. And Sam Giancana says, wait a minute. Wait, why is it so important for you to go across the street? And he says, well, I'm on the swim team. He says, let me ask you, could you teach me how to swim? And my father says, yeah, but we'll have to change your name to Sam Rosenberg. And he says, okay. And that's how it started, okay? And from that point on, my father drove a beer truck with Sam Giancana riding shotgun with the shotgun to Milwaukee. He was a very good student. My father was a very good student. The vice principal checked his record. And when he was a senior in high school, he asked my father, what would you like to do? And my father said, well, I'd like to be a general surgeon. He wanted to be a medical doctor. And the vice principal said, well, let me see what I could do for you. And he knew someone in the admissions office at the University of Chicago. And he came back and told my father that he would be able to get him into the University of Chicago, which is a very renowned university. And he goes home, he tells his mother, and his mother says, yeah, that sounds great, but you got to go to work. So my father never went to college and pursued the life in organized crime. It was high ranking. My father was very high ranking. He was a manager for Paul Ricca, who who basically took over. Rico was an underboss for Frank Nitti, who had taken over for Big Al, as my father called Al Capone. And he had been convicted with Capone in the tax evasion case where Capone got 11 years, he got 18 months. And he was a manager for Paul Ricca because Sam Giancana was a protege of Paul Ricca. And he told Paul Ricca about my father. He said, he's a smart guy. You can work with him. He knows a lot of things, and he can really work out well for you. And Paul Ricca decided to give my father an opportunity as a manager. He said, you're going to manage the Black Hands. Well, the Black Hands were not interested. My father played cards with these guys, but the Black Hands were all Sicilians, and they came to America. And as far as they were concerned, if you were from Northern Italy, okay, we'll accept you, but you're never going to have an executive position. You're never going to move up. That's as far as you're going to go. And if you were non-Italian, well, no, you're not going to be in the mob at all. And they were extortionists and very violent people, extremely violent. But my father had played cards with them, and the first thing he said to them was, well, what's your beef? And they said, we like to get paid every week, because in mob life, you never know when you're getting paid. So sure enough, my father said, well, let me see. They said this, if you guys go out and hustle on the street, bring in the money, I'll talk with Paul. And that's what happened. He talked to Paul Ricca. He told Paul Ricca, look, you'll get 10% kickback. And Paul Ricca said, okay, they're bringing in the money. He saw the money, start paying him every Friday. From there, he became Sam Giancana's consigliere. He reported to Tony Accardo, and he was a consigliere for Joey Aiuppa. But his legacy, Mark, if you were to say to me, what was his legacy? His legacy was the 7 hotels and 7 casinos that he had the plan for, that he built in Las Vegas. And at the age of 8 in 1956, I was going 5 times a year to Las Vegas with my father. And I saw everything from the beginning, how the hotels ran, how they were set up. I also learned which celebrities were good people, which ones were bad people. And with my father, the approach with me was, you're going to see everything, but you're going to make your own decision if you want to go into life. I'm not going to force you, but you're going to go in with your eyes open. And I saw everything. I saw everything. Now, with every mob family, there's a rule that they all follow, and that is cops and kids are off limits. But for me, that rule was never going to work. It wasn't going to apply to me because the outfit at their height was bringing in $200 million a year in criminal revenue.
That's insane. What an insane number.
Jeez. Was bringing in 100 million of that 200 million. So those rules were not going to apply to me. And that money was coming in from all over, not over some of the things you mentioned, but even beyond that, vending machines, jukebox machines, pinball machines. There were mob families that reported to Chicago, okay, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Des Moines, Omaha, St. Louis, eventually Los Angeles in 1957. San Jose reported to Milwaukee, who reported to Chicago. So eventually San Jose wound up reporting. So the money was coming in all different ways.
Your dad was in the mob for over 55 years, never went to jail.
That's correct. That is correct. And the reason being, my father was extremely careful, Mark. First of all, he would work legitimate jobs, okay, to get a W-2. Because in any mob case, whenever the U.S. Attorney's Office is investigating, they always call in the IRS criminal division to look to see if they can find income that either has not been reported or false tax returns or a tax demeanor. Those are the 3 charges today that someone could be charged with. And those are sometimes the easiest charges to stick, in a case. So they would try and tag that along with other criminal charges. And also my father was the type of guy who would meet with people in churches, in synagogues, in cemeteries. He didn't really like, going to restaurants because he said they might have a bug under there. So if he went, sure, he had to go, but he just didn't talk. He didn't say anything. He used payphones, okay? He had payphones. He had people call people on payphones. He would call from the church, okay? And these priests were funny because a lot of times my father would give them $5 and say it's a donation. Or if they were drinkers, he'd bring in Jack Daniels for them or Johnny Walker Red. And we had a few churches. I'd say there was about 4 churches that would have in the basement, and none of the parishioners knew, a freezer. And if someone got whacked or hit, or the other term is the public doesn't know, is give him his receipt. So Mark, if you're ever in a store and the clerk says, Mr. Thompson, do you want your receipt? Run out of that store as fast as you can. You don't want that receipt. That means it's going to kill you. And so they would put the body in the freezer, and the next day come with the body bag and take it out of the freezer.
Unbelievable. It's wild. Of course, everybody had their price, including the maybe especially the priests in this case.
Oh,
They
absolutely.
were,
because it was all about absolution for them. It was all about absolution. Wise guys always wanted absolution at the end of their life.
Well, let me ask you why you didn't. I mentioned how seductive this life is, and then you point to the fact that it had broadened its imprint well past Chicago into this glamorous life around Las Vegas, where your dad took you, and you could see not only what a moneymaker it was, but come on, it was a pretty shimmering existence. Why did you not want to get into that?
Absolutely, and I'll give you an example of what else there I saw was a lot of times when my father would take me. See, one of the things is when you see the movies, and I had to go back and look at movies to be honest with you. Because growing up in a mob life, it's like your business. You're not that interested in seeing a movie about but you know the business. Right. So what would happen is the way the hotels were set up, you had to have private investors because otherwise you couldn't get a gaming license. Nevada State Gaming Commission is not going to give mobsters gaming license. So you had to have them. But the deal was they would run the hotel part and the outfit would run the casino. So when I go with my father to Las Vegas, sometimes we get there and he'd say, well, Scott, I don't want you to go to the meeting. And my weekend mother would be a mob prostitute, okay? And my father would want to give her money, take me to the movie, dinner. They said no, because a lot of them were late 20s, early 30s. I'm 8, 9 years old. I could almost be their son, So one time we're in a restaurant and this John comes up to a mob prostitute and says, who's that? Points his finger at me. And she says, that's my date. So I didn't need sex education in school. Let me tell you, that's for sure.
That's wild, man. That's really wild. So, but it didn't spark you. It didn't.
Well, I'll
lead
tell you
you
really
to
what it was, Mark. What had happened was that really probably made a big influence on me without me knowing it was going to be making a big influence. Was when I went to college, I told my father I wanted to continue my education, and I didn't want to be an active participant. Now, I tell people I was an observer, which I saw stuff, sure, after in the 70s and the 80s, my father was still there. I was with them, but I wasn't going to be active in the sense where I could be charged with a criminal, as part of a criminal enterprise. And what really had an effect was in March of 1969, or March of 1970, I'm sorry, I was coming home for spring break, as you remember when you were in college, spring break. And I told my father, I said, Dad, in New York Times in January of 1970, I'm reading this thing about a RICO Act. That's nothing, right? It's not going to affect the outfit. And he said to me, looked at me, said, Scott, the days of the Code of Omerta, which is the Code of Silence, are going to be coming to an end as time goes on. And he said, the rats are going to be jumping off the ship as time goes on because of what the RICO Act was. And it was 85% of your time. And it was not like it was going to be like it was before. And that's really what happened. You started to see a lot of guys as time went on.
I see. You saw a lot of people going away.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time in courtrooms, And
so let me be in our last couple of minutes. Scott Hoffman, the book is Inside. It's chronicling the mob they call it the outfit around Chicago, but well beyond Chicago, and there's a whole story involved. But we're just now about why you didn't get into it, being so close to it, and your dad being, high up in the organization, the outfit. Was it that, Scott? In other words, had you then seen, this RICO thing is going to pretty much end that life, or was there other stuff about it that you just felt, nah, you know what, this isn't for me?
Well, the thing is this, as my father always told me from the beginning, in the life, it's a two-shouldered operation. The left shoulder, you're looking over to see who's trying to whack you or give you your receipt. The right shoulder is the G, meaning the government is constantly going to be making cases. And that's really what it had a lot to do with it, because you never could have a life. There was always a tap on your phone. You always had to be careful what you said. You'd always have the G would be out front with the car taking pictures. If you were on a date, they were taking pictures of you and the girl. So it was really a confining life. Now, for some guys, they don't care, but it was a confining life, at least for me. And I didn't see any future. And the advantage of seeing it so young was most guys, when they go into the life, they're dropping out of high school, 16, 17. They don't know. They have expectations of what they think the life is, and that's not what the life is. And I saw it at a young age. So by 16, 17, I was a hard veteran of what.
Well, if you saw it from the top down, like, I mean,
Yes.
if your dad was that high up,
Yes.
did you ever see somebody offed? Did you see them?
When I was 9 years old. Okay, when I was 9 years old, I saw my first murder. That was my first murder. I saw many after that. And that was
Somebody was shot?
Yeah, and it wasn't even really a mob murder. What it was someone gave Sam Giancana bad financial advice. So 2 mobsters were sent out, and it was on my birthday. My father says, Scott, Sam Giancana has a birthday present for you. And I was really excited because I never had birthday presents. I never had a bicycle. I never had a kid's life. So these 2 mobsters take me, and the banks in those days closed at 4 o'clock. And we go to the bank. It's in Cicero, Illinois. And the banker comes out, in those days, the help would stay beyond 4 o'clock. He comes out, and one mobster starts revving up the engine, like I talk about in my book, because the other mobster is going to use a 22 with a silencer. Okay, and he gets out of the car. I'm sitting in the back, and he gives him 3 in the hat, meaning 3 in the back of the head. Okay, and then shoots him once in the chest. And then he gets in the car, and he says, Scott, happy birthday, get rid of the silencer. Now I'm 9 years old, and I didn't know what a silencer was. I didn't know what to do with it. And the mobster, the other mobster, the driver says, do you really want to do this? And he says, well, he's got to learn. So now here I put it in my winter coat, and I'm trying to figure out how am I going to get rid of a silencer after witnessing my first murder. When I was 11, I saw a guy's hands taken off. When I was 12, I saw a guy's head taken off by the same guy.
Oh my God!
Yeah. So
what did they took away? They took off the guy's hands by he was stealing or something.
Well, he owed money. He owed juice loan money.
God, that's just insane. But that the brutality of the mob is what I feel you don't see enough of in this romanticized version that we see in the movies.
I mean, if you were in my book, I had to water down what was actually physically done to the wife of a guy I was with a juice collector, and they're looking for juice money on a gambling loan, and she was pregnant, very obviously pregnant. And what actually happened to her physically, if I was to write exactly that went on, I don't think an audience could take it. It would make them very nauseous of what happened to a pregnant woman.
Sure. And I wanted to ask you 2 questions in our last couple of minutes. One is about what you've just talked about, and the book Inside goes through this this guy with he's got family and he's in the outfit and having to balance all these things. And this kind of gets me to my question after what you've just described. For you, because you're at 9 years old being exposed to all this horror, and it's being treated as sort of like run of the mill, it's what we do. Did you feel, how do you protect your soul? I mean that in whatever, how do you want to interpret that? Like, in other words, it's one thing to push away from it, but did it ruin you or destroy you? You seem like a pretty well-adjusted guy. I don't know. You're a writer.
Well, the thing was, you always have emotional scars. It's like if you talk to a guy who was a combat veteran in a war, and he's always going to remember what happened. Just like a cop shoots his first guy, for some offense maybe, he's always going to remember everything about that shooting. And you have emotional scars because I remember everything. When I started to write the book, I'm remembering stuff from maybe 60 years ago, 55 years ago, 60 years ago. It's coming back to me just as clear as possible. So you never lose it. It just, you realize that, as my father would say, there's always more good people than bad people. And you have to make the adjustment because no one had my life and they really wouldn't understand what my life was. So I had to make adjustments when I was in groups of people, when I was with people, and try and fit in. It was hard fitting in school. Remember, I had to go to elementary school to get my elementary school education, but yet I had to remember not to use mob speak. For example, we're in Lexington, Kentucky, okay? We're in Lexington, Kentucky at a federal facility visiting someone, and a guy says to my father, mobster, says to my father, did you do the thing? My father says, yes, I have done the thing. So we get in the car and I said, Dad, what was the thing? He said, Scott, it was the thing, not the thing. It's the thing. That's what we had to do, not the thing. The thing, that can be taken care of later. It's the thing that we got to take care of now. Well, I'm trying to separate all this. when I'm, with kids in the neighborhood, and someone says, "Well, Scott, you want to do this?" And I wasn't sure what he was talking about, so I can't say to him, "Is this the thing?" I'm trying to work around it. So
it's like difficult. That old Abbott and Costello routine. Yeah, who's on first? I don't mean to laugh, but it is funny.
No, it's funny.
Yeah. All right. So I said it would be the end, and it is going to be the end in one more minute. But I have now second to last question, and then a final question because it just came in. A final question from
Mark, if I could just slip in where people can buy my book.
Please. Yeah. It's available on Amazon, isn't it?
It's available on Amazon, but you have to put in Scott, SCOTT, middle initial M. You need the middle initial. Last name Hoffman, HOFFMAN, and write the word inside in, and you will see the book. It's also selling on Kindle because I've had some people buy it, as Kindle.
We're going to have Tony's going to put it in the description for our show. So if you're listening anywhere, you'll be able to just click that. That's a hot link to the book. Okay.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah. So he'll take care of that. What I was going to ask you was about your mom. How did your mom and what was the rest of the family like during all of this? I know we don't have much time, but just give us a quick idea.
Yeah. Well, my father told my mother beforehand what his life was about. Okay. And she said to him, "Keep it out of the house," meaning no meetings. Okay. Now, with my sister was 6.5 years older than myself, would eventually become a professional model. And Sam Giancana always wanted my sister to have drivers take her to high school. My sister never liked that. I mean, one of the drivers was Tony Spilaccio, Antonio Livio, and she would get out of the car and they would drive the car real slow, and someone would start honking. And Tony Spilaccio got out of the car and he pulled out a .22 and he says, "Do you have a problem?" And the guy rolled down the window, "Not at all. Take as much time as you need."
Wow. And now about something I got an email on to ask you about the mob and the Kennedy assassination.
Oh, yes. That's a long
Did your dad ever mention something with that, or did you?
Oh, yes. I
mean, it's long been alleged that the mob had something to do with JFK's assassination.
Yes, this much. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I will tell you this. Yes, my father was involved. My father knew Jack Ruby. His real name was Jack Rubenstein. He had gotten him a job on South State Street at the south end of Chicago, the Loop, downtown, to work in a strip club that was run by Tony Accardo. And my father, this is the one thing I would say about the movie The Irishman. And I knew Frank Sharon. I knew mostly all of them, Buffalino, Provenzano, of course, Jimmy Hoffa. And he always told me, I was involved in the Kennedy assassination. I got the rifle. And that's not true because my father bought 2 rifles. He bought, that was a Klein's sporting goods store in downtown Chicago for $12.99. And Jack Ruby came in and he actually gave Ruby one of the rifles and then he mailed the other one. But he didn't know. Ruby didn't tell him what the rifles were going to be about. But I'll tell you this, Mark, everything goes back to Cal Neva and the casino in South Lake Tahoe, where everything started with the Kennedys and the outfit. It has nothing to do with, I read an article just a couple of days ago as I was looking over your stuff, and it said that, well, Sam Giancana talked to Joseph P. Kennedy. No, that wasn't it at all. It wasn't that at all. It had nothing to do with that. But yes, the order was given, and Sam Giancana, who had the seat on the commission, Chicago still has a seat on the commission, really pushed for the orders to be given on John Kennedy. And that was all going back to Cal Neva and all what happened after Cal Neva. And it was all really Robert Kennedy reneging on everything he said he was going to do for the casino as far as the infrastructure, everything went bad from that point on. And Sam Giancana was not a guy who had the temperament that could just say, okay, forget about it. It's not going to happen. Yeah, there was a lot going on.
Was Oswald then just the patsy? There were others involved?
Correct. That's correct. There were others supposed to be involved, but I can't tell you they were, because unless you look at the ballistics, I mean, I remember at the time I was in high school and I had said to my father, it was terrible. And he says, we probably shot the wrong Kennedy. But as he said to me, he said, Scott, they said they got all the bullets from the rifle of Oswald. So if anybody else is shooting, where's the bullets? Because they didn't know what rifle Oswald he was using. So there's a lot of questions in my mind, unless I was to see the final ballistic report as to what were the bullets, if there were any additional bullets, or if it was true that all the bullets came from Oswald's gun. because a lot of people say things, but you have to remember that that car was going 30 miles an hour. He was right after the book depository. He was already hunched over, slumped over. It was a very difficult shot for anybody beyond the book depository to make. Very difficult because he wasn't upright.
Sure. But more to the point, you're saying your dad spoke of it openly to you.
Yeah.
As something
sure.
that was orchestrated and that we,
later.
the mob, are doing.
Yeah. That was later on. That was maybe about 10 years later. That was about at least 10 years later. He didn't say anything right away. He didn't say anything because I didn't even know about the rifles. I didn't know that he had met Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby came into Chicago, and Ruby never told him what they were for. But as soon as he heard about the shooting, then he knew right away it was all about Jack Ruby. Okay.
Again, the book is inside the author Scott M. Hoffman. There'll be a click-through on our description. You can find it on Amazon. Again, inside Scott M. You got to put the M in there, Hoffman, but you can just click through on the hot link that Tony will put in there. Scott, fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So glad you could take some time. Best of luck with the book, and I hope you'll visit again.
Thank you again, Mark, and thank you for your listeners. I'm sorry we didn't have enough time, but I could keep you there until you're 150 years old with stories.
This may just be your first visit, all right, Scott? So don't go far. All right. I love that we've made the connection. Thank you, Scott Hoffman. All right. Good stuff. Wow.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I know we're late. We started a little behind and we finished a little behind. Kim has to go to the after party. Tony,
Yep.
do I need to do anything? You have the after party, don't you?
Yeah, we have the after party.
Okay, we have the
Kim, how are you?
What Tony, do we need anything? Do I need to do anything?
I think we're good.
Thanks, Tony.
We acknowledge this one, right?
I will acknowledge the many people who put this show on every day. That is you, Kathleen Marshall. You know who I'm talking about.
Big shout out.
Big shout out to Kathleen Marshall. Come on. Love my Kathleen Marshall. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Louise, thank you so much. Enjoy a margarita and cheeseburger in paradise. Jimmy Buffett. Rest in peace, Jimmy Buffett. Thanks for the $5, Louise. And rest in peace, Gary Wright. Who else did we recognize? Sausalito Steve. Thank you for the 10.
Big shout out.
Big shout out to Sausalito Steve. Got a lot done today. I was impressed. And tomorrow will be another day where we get a lot done. We'll go to those drops that Trevor has sent me. John Rothman comes in tomorrow. What else do we have tomorrow, Kim? Anything I need to know about?
We have some good things. John Rothman is going to be in,
I
think we have another author. There's another really great story coming up.
There's another author of the great story.
Bye-bye.
The after party
We'll
live.
do it live. All right,
They're doing it
we'll do it
live.
live.
Until tomorrow. Bye-bye.